We're now up to Daf Chav Tes Amud Beit. And we're trying to understand why the Brisa that we quoted here in Chav Tes Amud Aleph finds it necessary to have two different cases, Ola and then Shlomim, Shlomim and then Ola. The Gemara says, if we assume that one case is Kedushas Damim, where he added the word Lidmei, and the other is Kedushas Haguf with his Be'ach, then we need both cases. Each case has to be brought down, and he needs Tarti. Each one is a Chiddush. Why? Why does he need both the Reish and the Seif? But Salka Daitechamina Kedushas Haguf lo Paka B'Chdi. I would have a Havamina like Rabba's Shita Lamaisa Lamaskana that Kedushas Haguf is not Paka B'Chdi. And Kedushas Damim is Paka B'Chdi. The Amtu Lahachi Tana Tarti. Logically, I could have come to the mistaken conclusion to be Machalik, to differentiate between these two categories of Kedusha. If the Tana would have said only one case, the Ofen Echad, or for example, let's say he would have had only one case of Kedushas Ola that came first, or Kedushas Shlomim came first. So then the law of thumb, the rule of thumb is that we always take the lesser Chidush. And if you're telling me that the first Kedusha will be podcast to allow room for the second Kedusha to be Chal, and you don't need a pigeon for the first Kedusha, we're going to apply that to the lower case Chidush, the lesser Chidush, and that's Kedusha's Damin. And Kedusha's Damin is Pokea below pigeon. But we would have made a mistake and we have come to the conclusion that Kedusha's Guf is not Pokea. Is therefore Tana, Tarte, the Mishnah, the Bryce had to say both cases. And then we ask ourselves the question, well, why do we need two cases? And the answer is to teach us that both in Kedusha's Damin and Kedusha's Guf, the Kedusha's Pokas without a Maisapidya of the This is the front of the question of Abayan Rava. Kedushas Damim, according to you, Rav, you have no choice. It's impossible to interpret this Bryce as referring to Kedushas Haguf, Limizbeach, because such a Kedusha is never Paka. How can the Kedusha of Shlomim be replaced by Ola or vice versa? So you have no choice but to assume that both of these cases, the Reish and the Sefer, talking about Kedushas Damim, is Lama Leila Misnei Tarte. What justifies the Brisa having to mention two different cases in two different sequences, one where the Ola came first, Shlomim next, the other where the Shlom came first and the Ola came second? Why did the Tana have to repeat himself? I mean, it's just basically one principle over here, that Kedushas Damim is Paka. And it makes no difference whether the Kedushas Ola or Kedushas Shlomim. And Abai explains the logic here. If it would have had only one case, Hashna Yesh Lomar, Mikdusha Chamur Kedusha Kala Poka is Mikdusha Kedusha Kala Kedusha Chamura Srichel and Meimar. If, for example, you started by saying Shar Zeh Ola, Kol Shloshim Yom, and after Shloshim Yom it should become a Shlomim. So you're talking about Kedushas Ola as a Kedusha Chamura vis-a-vis Shlom, which is a Kedusha Kala, and yet the Kedushas Ola is Paka. Again, we're talking about a Kedushas Damim. So Abaye, in his presentation, is now assuming that even when you're Magdish Lidami, there are different levels of Hegdesh, and the distinction between Chamura and Kala is relevant, and therefore, when he's Magdish the first Hegdesh as Kedushas Ola Lidami for 30 days, that's called relatively a Kedusha Chamura. And yet, that Kedusha is Paka at the end of the 30 days to make room for the Kedusha Kala of Shlomim. Is therefore, you have to as a rhetorical question, do you have to tell me that from Kedusha Kala, if he was Magdish it for Shlomim for 30 days, and then afterwards it should become Kadosh B'Kedushas Ola, again Ola Dami. So you went from Kedusha Kala to Kedusha Chamura. Do I have to tell you that the Kedusha Kala is Paka? I understand this by myself. It's a simple, straightforward kal v'chomer. He writes the following. He says, "V'chitzarich lomar sha'kedusha kala pokas v'chala kedusha chamura." I mean, you've already told me that you could accept the principle of kedusha chamura pokas. Now you have to tell me that kedusha kala is pokas. It goes without saying that kedusha kala is pokas. So he says, "Shor zeh shlomim kol shloshim yom lacher shloshim yom ola." So the kedusha shlomim is kala vis-a-vis the kedusha ola, which is chamura. And it's poshut in that case that the kedusha kal is pokas to make room for kedusha chamura. So the Tana didn't have to tell me two dinim in two different cases. It didn't have to tell me kedusha chamura kadma and then kedusha kala kadma. It could have just told me one case, and we would have derived the other case with the kal v'chomer. Just tell me that if it was magdishet liola l'shloshim yom, and then it should be kaddish kedusha shlomim. That's a valid hegdish, and it becomes shlomim without any pidyon. And then I would derive with the kal v'chomer, how much more so in the case of kedusha shlomim first, and then kedusha ola second. Therefore, says Abaye, in order to justify that the Brisa was compelled to have both the right Resha and the Sefer, the two cases, ola and then shlomim, shlomim and ola, it must be that we're adding a whole new element into the equation. And the Bryce is talking about Kedusha Saguf. Therefore, says Abaye, we prove that Kedusha Saguf is Paka B'chdi. Now, all this was a dialogue back and forth between Abaye and Rava. But truth be told, that Rava was standing on the shoulders of Bar Pada. He was really explaining Bar Pada. Because back on Daf Chavches Amid Beis, we had a machlokas between Ula and Bar Pada. Ula was of the opinion that if he says Netios Elu, Karban Ashi Yiktzitu, Ein Lam Pidyon, there's no need for Pidyon. It's Paka B'chdi, because he stipulated from the get-go that the Netios should only be Hegdesh, should only be Kadosh until Ktsitza. And Bar Pada says no. You need a Pidyon. So let me tell you, truth to the Bar Pada, Yomalo Paka Kedusha B'chdi. Shall we say that this Brisa is a TKO against Bar Pada? Because we've already proven, based on Abaye's analysis, that Kedusha Saguf is lo Paka B'chdi. And the truth is that Bar Pada, when he was talking about the case of Netios, he was talking about Kedusha's Damim. And even in the case of Kedusha's Damim, Bar Pada was of the opinion lo Paka B'chdi, he needs opinion. So truth is that this brisa is schwer, is difficult for Bar Pada, even if we couldn't prove, as Abaye did with his very fancy analysis, that the brisa is talking even about Kedusha Saguf, we could still ask a kash on Bar Pada, because Bar Pada went so far as to say that even in Kedusha's Damim, lo Paka B'chdi. So the Ran says the following, that if not for Abaye's proof that the brisa was talking about even Kedusha Saguf, we would not be able to slug up our Bar Pada from this brisa, even though, again, Bar Pada is of the opinion that even in Kedusha's Damim, lo Paka B'chdi, because then Bar Pada could have said about this brisa that in fact it was a case where he was poda the behemoth, and only then the Kedusha Shniya is Chal. So you could not prove that Kedusha is Paka B'chdi, but after Abaye's proof, his analysis, that the brisa is talking even about Kedusha Saguf, then you can't introduce Pidyon into the equation. You can't say he was Poda because there's no Pidyon on Kedusha Saguf as long as it's the Damim. So we would not be able to interpret this brisa as to say that the Kedusha Shni is Chal only after Pidyon, because there is no Pidyon in the case of Kedusha Saguf. So therefore, the whole shlug up here of Bar Pada could only be standing on the shoulders of Abaye's logical proof that the Bryce is talking about Kedushas Gagul. Because if we would interpret the Bryce as Kedushas Domim, then Bar Pada has an easy way out. You could just say that we're talking about a case of after Pidyon. And that's when the second Kedushas come. But in Kedushas Gagul, there is no Pidyon. And now the Gemara tries to come up with a defense for Bar Pada. I mean, I'm assuming Bar Pada was long gone. So in the next generation, they had to somehow make, defend him against the Brisa. And this is where Rav Papa steps up to the plate. Amar Rav Papa, Amar Lecha Bar Pada. This is what Bar Pada would have said in his own self-defense if he was alive and able to do so. Hachi Kama. We're going to go now to the Sefer of the Brisa and revisit the Sefer of the Brisa. Okay, then? And in the Sefer of the Brisa, we went from Kedusha Kala, from Kedusha Chamura down to Kedusha Kala. So he starts with Olah, and he says that this Olah, after 30 days, will become Shlomim. Okay. Hachikama, says Rav Papa. This is the way we would interpret the Sefer of the Brisa. Imlo Amar me'achshav Shlomim. So what happened? Obviously, he made a statement that this behemoth should become, this shar should become an olah after 30 days. We assume in the Brisa that he said that now it should be Shlomim, right? Because it went from a lower Kedusha to a higher Kedusha, from Shlomim to olah. Says Rav Papa, no. He didn't say me'achshav Shlomim. He said li'achar shloshim yom olah havi. Now there's an amazing chiddush here, because the chalos kedushas olah will not be chal now, but rather li'achar shloshim. And the Gemara, Rav Papa is now going to make an analogy to the case of, which is called in Shas, Nis'aku Amos. It appears in many Gemaras in Shas. Homer le'ishas kachim li'achar shloshim yom. The mekudeshes afal pisha Nis'aku Amos. Every Kedushin is made up of two parts, the Maisa Kedushin and the Chalos HaIshus. In the case of his Kachri Li'achar Shloshim Yom, he separates between the Maisa Kedushin, which he does now today, and the Chalos Kedushin, the Chalos HaIshus, which he postpones for 30 days. Now the question arises, can the Chalos Kedushin be Chal 30 days down the line if the Mos, which means the original Maisa Kedushin, is completely gone? So you have now a disconnect between the Maisa Kedushin, namely the giving of the Mos, and the Chalos HaIshus 30 days when the time comes, because in the meantime, in the interim between the beginning of the month and the end of the month, this Akua Mos, the Mos are gone. So the Chiddush now in the Brisa, in the case of Liachar Shloshim Yom Ola, is equal to the Chiddush of his Kachi Liachar Shloshim Yom. That a man could be Magdish an animal today, meaning the Maisa Hegdesh, like the Kedusha, the Maisa Kedusha is today, but he stipulates that the Hegdesh, in this case Shlomim, in Ola, should only be Chal 30 days down the line. So he too is separating between the Maisa and the Chalos. So Rav Papa is basically saying that according to Bar Pada, we're not talking about Kedusha Paka B'Chedi, which would be, of course, an upshload to Bar Pada, in the case of Kedusha Haguf, and even in Kedusha Damim, but rather we're talking about a whole different Chiddush in this Brisa. The Brisa is talking about a case where he did not say Mi'ach of Shlomim and then 30 days down the line should be an Olah, but rather that the Kedushas Ola should be Chal after 30 days. And the Chalos is not immediate. He's separated between the Maisa Hegdesh and the Chalos Hegdesh in the Behema, which will only be Liachar Zman. And if not for the Chiddush of this price, I would have thought that a person cannot create a Kedusha now that'll only take effect in 30 days Liachar Zman. So that's the Gevaldige Chiddush of the Brisa, that just like in Isha, you could say, Kachi Liachar Shloshim, so too, he could say, Arezeh Ola Liachar Shloshim. Now, let's keep in mind that we had two cases in the Brisa, so there's got to be two Chidushim. Right? That's what we're trying to justify. That was Abai's whole thesis. So we're going to say the following, that in a case where he adds the words Me'achshav Shlomim, which means that immediately there'll be a Chalos Kedusha Shlomim, the Kedushas Ola cannot be Chal after 30 days, because Ein Kedusha Paka B'chdi. So basically the Brisa is made up of two dinim. One din is Hegdesh Ola Liachar Shloshim, and that's a valid Hegdesh. And even though the Mais Hegdesh was now, the Chalos Kedusha will be Chal only in 30 days. And then there's another Chiddush that if he had said Harei Zeh Shlomim Achshav and Ola Liachar Shloshim, so Liachar Shlomim means that now it'll be Chal Shlomim, he cannot be Mechil a Kedusha of Ola in a 30-day period because Kedushas Shlomim Lo Paka B'Chdi. So Gemara asks Pshita. The Gemara thinks that it's absolutely simple, without any new insight here, that you could be Magdish something that the Chalos Kedusha Hegdesh will be Chal Liachar Zman, not at the time that he's Magdish. And we saw the same thing in Kedushin. He could be Magdish, Mekadosh and Isha for Liachar Shloshim or Liachar Zman. So the Gemara is looking now for an extra Chidush here in this Brisa that, according to Rav Papa's interpretation in defense of Rav Papa, of Bar Pada, is talking about Liachar Shloshim Yom Lo Tzricha de Hadarve. Now we have a tremendous machlokus here between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish and the Gemara in Kedushin and text. If a man is Mekadosh and Isha Liachar Zman, so he says, here's your kesef, and you'll be Mekudeshes 30 days down the line. Can she change her mind within the 30 days? At the beginning of the month, she accepted the Kedusha. So the Maisa Kedusha was Chal in a complete way. But now she decides, this is not a good idea. And she even goes a step further. She accepts Kedusha from another person. And according to Reish Lakish, she can be Choseres Ba. I'm sorry, according to Rabbi Yochanan, she could be Choseres Ba. Why? Because there's no Chalos Kedusha until after 30 days. So when the Chalos Kedusha is cooking, she says, I'm out. I'm not interested. Which would mean now she needs a get from the second husband. Reish Lakish says, no. Ain't a Choseres. She's an Eishes Ish, whether she likes it or not. And the Kedusha from the Sheni is Batul V'Mutal. And why does Reish Lakish say Ain't a Choseres? Because Reish Lakish says that since the Maisa Kedusha was complete, I don't need anything else for the Chalos Kedusha to be Chal. I just need the time period to pass. Just look at the clock. Tick, day after day after day. So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha da hadarba. After the man was magdish, the animal, as an ol yachar shloshim yom, he decides to change his mind. And the chiddush is that the animal will be chal hegdish, whether he likes it or not, like Rabbi Yochanan. Just like Rabbi Yochanan says. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I keep getting confused. It's very good according to Reish Lakish, who says in Kedushin Ein Choseres, and that's the Chiddush of this brisa. Then Ein Yochel Lachzor Bo, he can't rescind his original Hegdish as an Ola at the beginning of the month. Elamanti Omar Choseres, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, Michael Meimar, Rabbi Yochanan holds that you could be Choser. So you can't tell me that this brisa is coming to teach me that the Kedushas Ola will be Chal automatically at the end of the 30 days, even though he changed his mind within the 30-day period. Because Rabbi Yochanan holds Choseres. And just like Rabbi Yochanan holds Choseres in Kedushin Lachar Lamed, so too, Yesh Chazora Behegdish Hagur, the Kedushas Korban. Again, this is a theme throughout today's daf, that there's an equation between Hegdish and Kedushas Haguf and Mizbeach. More answers, even according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that she can change her mind and rescind the Kedushin. In the case of Hegdish, it's different. The price is being machadish that in Hegdish you can't be choser. It's not like Kedusha Isha. Finally, we get to the point where we can differentiate between Hegdish and Kedusha Isha. And that is because in Hegdish, the Chalos Hegdish is complete from one perspective at least, immediately at the time that he's Magdish. And he can't be choser. Iran, I don't know what's going on. Okay, I mean, Russell Hegdish, Kimisir Lehedjo. Okay, let's take the case of Misir Lehedjo. I give you something, and I say it's yours, Liacher Shloshim Yom. I can be Choser Bo until the Chalos Kinyan is Chal. So what does the Gemara gain by saying that in Hegdish she can't be Choser Bo because Kimisir Russell Lehedjo? Even in Misir Lehedjo, he can be Choser Bo. I mean, when you hear the Ran's Kasha here, you realize you don't know what is going on in this Gemara. Now, let's try to understand the Ran's answer. Amir al-Gavar, even though he didn't say Me'achshon, he can Misir Lehedjo Bekinyan Gamur. You can have a Misir Lehedjo, but it's not really a Kinyan Gomer because you're postponing the Chalos for 30 days. And therefore, the status of Misir Lehedjot in the case of Amir L'Gavor is that of Me'achshon. It's as if he said Me'achshon. I'll just tell you what the Ran says. Obviously, this requires a lot of study. The Gemara says, Yosef, Rabbi Ovin, Rabbi Yitzchak Rei, the Kaveh, the Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Kamenamim, Rabbi Yirmiyah, Yasvei, the Ka'omrei, and Rabbi Ovin and Rabbi Yitzchak was saying the following. Again, it was in the presence of Rabbi Yirmiyah, but Rabbi Yirmiyah was a little bit out to lunch at this point. He was half asleep. And what did they say? Again, we'll soon see that Rabbi Yirmiyah wakes up and he has his comment to make. But now, the Das Bar Pada, the Omar Pidon Chozos V'Kedoshos. Again, he was Magdish Netios Ad Sheyiktitzu. Then he was Poda them. Automatically, according to Bar Pada, they become Kedoshos. Because when he says Ad Sheyiktitzu, he is basically saying that Pidyon will not be operative as long as the Netios are attached to the ground until Ktsitza. So they'll be Kedoshos Liolam Ad Sheyiktitzu. And therefore, if he'll be Poda them, they go back to being Kedosh. Now we turn to the Aflamid. Is Tifshot boy Rav Oshia. We should now have an answer to the suffix of Rabbi Oshia. What was the suffix of Rabbi Oshia? So, can a person create a chalos now that will be chal later after you mafkia the situation that's present, that's current? So, for example, he gives two prutos. He says, with one prut you're mekudeshes now, and the other prut you'll be mekudeshes after I divorce you. But now he can't be mekadosh with the second pruta because she's already mekudeshes. And the suffix of Rav Oshia is hanosei shtei prutas lish yomelah be'achas is kachli ayom achas kachlach shagarshech. Would the second pruta generate kedushin immediately after the gerushin without a new ma'aseh kedushin? And Rabbi Avin and Rabbi Yitzchak say that now we could be poshet Rav Hoshia's suffix from the din of Bar Pada. According to Bar Pada, a person can be magdish these netios ad sheyiktitzu, which means that even after pidyon they'll become kodesh. But he's adding a second kodesh after pidyon when now it's in a state of kedusha. Is hachanami davi kedushin? If that's valid, Bar Pada, and he can say now I'm being magdashit fully akar pidyon, because that's Bar Pada sheet of ad sheyiktitzu, that even after pidyon it goes back to being hegdesh. So if you have the power to be magdish something for the time after you mafkir the present situation, namely after pidyon, and then after pidyon the hegdesh will be chal automatically, then the same thing should apply to kedushin, and the second pruta should be chal after his gerushin, even though right now when he gave her the second pruta, she's already mekudeshes. And all this was fine and dandy until his ayar behu Rabbi Yirmiyah woke up, and the alarm clock went off, and he didn't press the pause, the button there. Amalahu, my covidasidur. What is going on with you guys? What kind of a comparison, an analogy are you making? Pidanahu. There's a fundamental difference between Bar Pada's case, where he himself was poded, to a case of Pidon Acherin. If someone else would be poded, and the Kedusha would again be chal because of the original Hegdesh, that couldn't work. Rav Yochanan, Pidon hu chozos u'kedoshos, Pidon acherim, ein chozos u'kedoshos. The isha kipidom acherim dami. Okay, then, so this is where we're going to stop for today. And the Mirza Hashem will pick this up tomorrow. Now, I have a little bit of a conflict tomorrow